Abdullah died when he was 3 months old. The clothes that you see in this picture right here that he is wearing, they were the last clothes he ever wore. That outfit that he put on, or that we put on him, that my wife put on him, was the last outfit he ever wore. I was 20 years old at the time. He was my third son. And the cause of his death was SDS, or ISDS, Infant Sudden Death Syndrome. And the story behind how he died is an interesting one. I had just finished my last class at University of Hertfordshire. And it was a Friday. And as I always come home tired on a Friday evening at that time whilst I was studying. Long day studying during the daytime. I would do all of my university work at university, come home quite late and then go straight to the gym. So by the time I'm walking into the house, it's around midnight. And I do all of that. I get on the bus, I come back to Luton, I go to the gym, I train, and I'm walking back home. I get into the house at around 11:30, midnight. And I see Abdullah there in bed with his mum. And I kiss him on his head. And then I shower, I have a bit of food, and I go straight to sleep. I'm smashed, I'm completely shattered. 3 hours later, at around 3 a.m. in the morning, we hear a fight break out in the hall between our neighbors. And we lived with one particular couple who they would often fight, and they were often drunk. Nice couple. But when they would fight, it was really bad. And when they were drunk, they were really drunk. This scuffle that happened at 3 a.m. in the morning, it woke up my other two sons who were sleeping in their own room. And they were two and three respectively at the time, very young. The kids were all very close in age. And so my wife initially went to the other room to settle the boys, but then Abdullah needed to be tended to, or so my wife thought. So she asked me, can I go and sleep with the boys so that she can go back and take care of the baby? He was a suckling baby. He was only 2.5, nearly 3 months at the time. I say, okay, no problem. I go to the boys' room and I lie down with them and I go back to sleep. The scuffle in the hallway had broken up and the drunken couple went back upstairs to their respective abodes. My wife all of a sudden walks into the room, banging, bang, bang, bang on the door. And the first word she said to me was, Mahdi, Abdullah's not breathing. And when she said that, I got out of bed immediately. And I took one look at him, just one look. And even though when he went to bed the night before, he was perfectly healthy, there was nothing wrong with him. Even though he had no underlying health conditions, even though he was a perfectly healthy baby, I knew in that moment, instantly and immediately, that he had died. I don't know if it's some type of human instinct or a paternal instinct, or I don't know what is. But the moment I looked at him and I touched his body, which was stiff, rock solid, I knew that my son had died. I called 999 straight away. Ambulance are on the phone. What's your emergency? Hello there. My son, he's not breathing. And he's rock solid. His body feels frozen. The 999 emergency operator on the line, she immediately gives me instructions on how to do CPR to my son, to Abdullah. And at the same time, they send an ambulance. So there's an ambulance on its way. I start doing mouth-to-mouth breathing on my son, following the instructions that were given to me by the 999 operator on the phone, and applying chest compressions with my finger. And all the while I'm thinking, he's dead. He's gone. He's not here. I don't know how. I'm not a medical professional. I hadn't studied medicine. But one look at that baby, one look at that child told me that this young man, he's not here anymore. My wife, in a panic, she runs a hot bath and she tries to put him in the bath, because in that panic, she said to me, he's frozen. He's not breathing, he's frozen. And I said to myself, how could he freeze? At that time, I was not aware of the phenomena that happens to a body after the body passes, called rigor mortis, which is a process where the cells break down, and because there's no circulation, I'm butchering this medical explanation completely, but because there's no circulation from the heart pumping the blood around the cells, they kind of like jam up, and this causes the body to go stiff for a period of time. In babies, this can happen half an hour after death. In adults, it takes a few hours, a bit longer. She runs the bath, she puts him in the bath in the hope to defrost him. The poor woman didn't know what else to do. And I frankly didn't know what to do either. Try it, I don't know. As soon as she brings him out and I say to her, look, I need to continue with these chest compressions and doing CPR. I continue with the chest compressions and doing CPR, and the 999 operator is on the phone with me the whole time. Our front door is open at this point. We leave it open for the paramedics to be able to enter our home without having to knock. The paramedics enter the home. They come in. It was a lady, brunette hair. She took one look at my son. Now my son, Abdullah, was on the bedroom floor. I was doing compressions with him, chest compressions and CPR, and he was on the bedroom floor. She took one look at him. She didn't even touch him, diagnose him, or have a look to see, nothing. She took one look, and something must have, a switch must have flipped in her expert eye. She picked him up and she ran straight back out. She didn't even talk to me. She ran straight to the ambulance. I followed behind her. I didn't even have my shoes on. Remember, this is 3 a.m. in the morning, disoriented, half asleep. I've had an exhausting week at university, and I finished it off with another workout in the gym, and I went to bed late, and then we are woken up by the neighbors. I follow her. We get into the ambulance. The sirens are blaring, they're making their sounds, and we're on our way to hospital, and they're administering the electric things that you put on the chest to try and bring somebody back to life if their heart stops beating. The whole time they're doing this, I know in my mind he has passed, that he is not here anymore. I don't know how or why, it was just an instinct, a feeling. And lo and behold, when we got to the hospital, around half an hour later, they officially declared his death. Now, the really sad thing that happens when a child dies suddenly under your care is that the first to become suspects for the child's death is you, the parents. And the lady explained this to both me and my wife. She said, I know this is a terrible tragedy that has just happened, but I'm sorry to say that we do have to investigate this, and we are going to have to investigate you. And obviously we were cleared and there was nothing there, you know. But the point is that that is something you will have to deal with if you lose a child suddenly with no underlying medical cause. SIDS, sudden infant death syndrome. You will be a suspect. We got through that. We informed my family. My mum arrives to the hospital first. She's in pieces. I remember holding her. And the whole time that this surreal incident was happening, because until it happens, you never really expect these type of things to be able to happen to you. You never really think for a moment that you could lose a child suddenly, especially if your children are healthy and they're not suffering from any underlying health condition in the first place. It's not something you think of. The doctors tell us that because he's died suddenly, they're going to have to perform a post-mortem procedure to establish the cause of death and to rule us out as parents that we were not responsible. What this meant was that initially, after doing their initial examinations on the body, we were told that they need to take the brain out of the skull, and they cut a hole in the back of the head and they take the brain out of the skull. And they needed to perform these examinations, which would take a period of 6 weeks. I sought advice from my local masjid, and I said to them, the sunnah is to bury anyone who dies as soon as possible, but the doctors have told us that they need the brain for 6 weeks. What do we do? Do we wait, or do we bury the body? And we were told that we should bury the body without the brain. And notice, by the way, how I'm referring to my own son Abdullah. I'm not even referring to him as Abdullah anymore. I'm referring to him as the body. And this is an extremely chilling realization we all have to face, which is the moment we die, I am no longer Mahdi. You are no longer Firaz. You are no longer Shireen. You are no longer Sarah. You are no longer Muhammad. You are the body. People don't even refer to you by your name. You're just a body. SubhanAllah. How transient and temporary and fleeting this life is, and how fragile and quickly it can be taken away from you as well. May Allah grant us a righteous end. So we buried Abdullah without his brain. And 6 weeks later, we were called back to the cemetery and told that the brain had been sent back to, and they had found nothing. They had finally diagnosed it with SIDS, sudden infant death syndrome. And I remember very clearly, they told us to wait by his grave. And suddenly a man in a tailcoat and a top hat came out from around 100 yards. And he had a box in his hand. And he was walking very slowly. I want you to imagine the type of guy like a chauffeur, like a classy, old school, 100 years ago type of chauffeur with his long tailcoat and his top hat, and he's opening the door for so-and-so to come out. He was dressed like this. And he was marching with this box in his hand very slowly towards us. And it was only as he approached us that I realized that he was actually holding the box which contained my son's brain. We reopened the grave. We not all the way to the body, kind of like halfway. We put the box in the grave and buried it over and covered it. And many other things happened in between that, which for the purpose of this video I'm not going to go into. But I will never forget when I went to the masjid with Abdullah's body in my hand. I was holding him in my hand in his casket, and I walked into the masjid. We were about to pray Salatul Janazah on him, the funeral prayer. And I put his casket in the side room, like a library room in the masjid. This is just a tiny little thing. Whilst I prayed my Tahiyyatul Masjid, the 2 rak'ah that you pray when you enter the masjid. And I never forget when I saw one of my best friends there at the time, Abdus and he saw me and he didn't say a single word. And Abdus he just held me. He just grabbed me, put my head in his chest and just held me. No explanation required. I will never forget the sincerity in that, the feeling of sincere love in that gesture. Like, I felt that, man. I really felt that. No words were required. No words, no speech, nothing. And when one of my friend's wives and child died a couple of years later, I tried to reenact this. No words, just feel with that man at that moment in time. You may be thinking at this point, what does all of this have to do with the title of this video? Excellent question. 7 months after Abdullah passed, one of my friends approached me. And he said to me, Mahdi, I have a sister who has just become Muslim. She was young. She was in her teens, late teens. And I can't think of anyone that I would like for her to marry more than you. And I looked at him and I was like, are you serious? I'm 20 years old. I've got hardly a penny to my name and I'm studying full-time in university. Like, where did this come from, bro? At the same time, I was extremely flattered. Don't get it twisted. I was like, yo, wow. I had no idea what his sister looked like. I had never met her. I had no clue who she was, but I knew him and I trusted him. And we were very good friends at that time. So I did what any normal Muslim man would do. Who, when I say normal, I mean a Muslim man who is honest, who has integrity, who doesn't want to hide things unnecessarily from his wife. And so I went home that evening to my wife. And I said to her, Abdurrahman has just offered me his sister in marriage as a second wife. What do you think? All hell broke loose. And when I mean all hell broke loose, I mean I had an opportunity to experience and witness a side to my wife at that moment in time that I didn't know existed. I did not know that side to her existed. It was extreme. The anger, the venom. It was something that I had not seen from this woman before. And in the end, I did not marry Abdurrahman's sister. For other reasons, actually. It was personal reasons. It was actually not to do with the fact that my wife was not for it. There were personal reasons, which for the purpose of this video, I won't go into. But I said to myself, at that moment in time, if I do take another wife in the future, there is no way I'm telling this woman. No way. And the reason why I mentioned the passing of Abdullah, my son, at the beginning of this video is because you could make an argument that the timing was poor. The timing was bad. I was offered to take my friend's sister as a second wife only 7 months after our son has passed. But here's the thing. A woman by her nature will never want you to take another wife. And there will always be something that makes this a bad time or bad timing. And sometimes they may genuinely have a point. Was it too soon after my son's death? Maybe it was. Maybe it wasn't. Personally, I don't believe it was. Others would say, yes, it is too soon to be having that type of discussion. Regardless, what you need to know as a man is there will always be something your woman will raise with you to put you off getting married again. And you can run from pillar to post to try and meet those needs, requirements, demands, expectations that she has from you. No matter how many of them you reach or tick off or accomplish, she's still going to feel like the timing is off. And this is natural and normal. Your role as a man is to make that decision for yourself. You must decide for yourself if this is something you're willing to do. Which brings me to point number 2. Because when I did eventually take a second wife, 5 years later, lo and behold, the timing was still bad, of course. But more importantly, it got to a point where my first wife wanted to leave the marriage. She no longer wanted to remain in the marriage. And I, of course, wanted her to remain in the marriage because we had children. And I said to her, one day she turned and she said to me, with a very cold, blank look in her face, there was no emotion. I was used to her being emotional and saying things when she was hurt and upset and so on. But she had a very cold look in her face and she said, Mahdi, I don't love you anymore. with no emotion. And I realized on that day, she's telling the truth. She's not emotional. She doesn't love me. And I said to her, I don't care. Whether you love me or not, we have children and we are going to make this marriage work whether you like it or not. And regardless of what you do or say or don't do and don't say. This was a big mistake on my part. I was raised by a father who worked very hard to keep our family together. And as a result of that, I took on this mindset and I said to myself, divorce, impossible. No way will I ever divorce a woman or get divorced. And to this day, I have not divorced a woman. Khul is different. Khul is when a woman seeks to divorce a man. And if you're not Muslim and you're watching this, there are two types of divorce in Islam. One where the woman initiates it, one where the man initiates it. And I have never initiated a divorce to this day. However, what I did was communicate to my wife that regardless of how badly you behave, there will be no repercussions coming your way. And the ultimate repercussion is divorce. Now, am I saying that you should threaten with divorce all the time? No, I'm not saying that. What I am saying is that if there is no fear of a punitive measure of some sort, consequences, a price to pay of some sort, what you are telling your woman is that I give you permission to behave how you like. It doesn't matter. Do as you please, say what you want to say, behave as you want to behave. And indeed, this is how my wife at that time ended up behaving. And if I'm to be fair to her, it's because she wanted out of the marriage. So the more abhorrently she behaved towards me, the more she was hoping that I would finally let her go. And in the end, she got her khul granted by one of the shuyukh, one of the sheikhs who was involved in our situation. And the mistake that I made was trying to have my cake and eat it. Here's one realization you are going to have to face if you want to take another wife. If you're married to a woman and you want to take another woman, there is a possibility you could lose the first one. If you are not willing to at least consider that this could happen, polygyny is not for you. And I'll tell you why. You have to be able to hold that consideration in your mind and in your heart, because ironically, it's the most likely way of you being able to keep that first marriage intact in the first place. When you communicate to a woman that you don't fear letting her go, that you don't mind if she leaves, if she disrespects you, if she crosses the line, it might hurt for a period of time, but you know what? These values and principles that I hold for myself are more important to me than whatever it is you are bringing to the table with me. When you communicate that to a woman without actually saying it with any words, she just knows. She is far more likely to stay. When you turn your back on the shadow has no choice but to follow you. When you go running after and chasing the shadow from pillar to post, doing your best to hold on to it, the shadow escapes you. It runs away from you. So too with women. I actually interviewed one of my wives a number of years ago on this channel, and you can check out the video right here.